Thanks for tuning in. This video is about fighting in the Philippines after the Spanish-American War. After watching this video, you should be able to analyze the causes and consequences of the Philippine-American War. It may be surprising to find out that the Philippines, which is far away from the Caribbean, would be part of the territory that the United States acquired after the Spanish-American War. Just take a look at this map. Here's the United States, right here. Here is Cuba. Here is Puerto Rico. And way over here is the Philippines. Well, we could actually say it's over here too, because, the world is round. But maybe it shouldn't be surprising that the United States ended up with this group of islands. After all, even though it was Spanish atrocities in Cuba that made Americans pursue a war with Spain, the actual real fighting of the Spanish-American War began in the Philippines. Just for some context, Congress declared war on Spain on April 20th, 1898. On May 1st of that same year, George Dewey, who became a legend of the American Navy, opened fire on Spanish ships not in Cuba, but in Manila, the capital of the Philippines. Dewey ended up destroying every ship there. Only one American crewman was lost. The fighting in Manila actually began the fighting of the Spanish-American War. And what that means is that there was not just combat in Cuba, but in the Philippines. And there were a number of Filipino rebels that welcomed the war between the two powers from the other side of the world, fighting it out on their homeland. Because just like the Cubans, the Filipinos also wanted to be free of Spanish rule. For 2 months, 11,000 American troops fought, seemingly to free the Filipinos from Spanish rule, along with Filipino rebels led by Emilio Aguinaldo, who's on your screen now. When the war was over and the Spanish were defeated, the Filipinos were surprised because they did not become a free country, but instead, Filipinos found themselves to have just switched imperial leaders. Instead of being controlled by the Spanish, the Filipinos were under the control of the US government. Aguinaldo and the Filipino rebels would not accept that result, and so they began to fight for their own freedom, this time from the United States. So what were the causes of the Philippine insurrection? Here's the rundown. 1. Filipinos believed they fought with Americans for Filipino independence. 2. Filipinos were surprised and disappointed when Americans remained after the war. And 3. Filipinos felt like they needed to continue to fight for their freedom. And the fighting was brutal. In Manila, there was a Marine named Littleton Waller. He shot 11 unarmed Filipinos during the war. Waller said that his general, General Smith, told him to kill and burn, and said that the more he killed and burned, the better pleased he, the general, would be. That it was not time to take prisoners, and that he was to make Samar a howling wilderness. When Major Weller asked General Smith to define the age limit for killing, the general replied, everything over 10. On the other side, Aguinaldo and the Filipino rebels used guerrilla tactics. Guerrilla tactics is when a smaller, less powerful fighting force uses ambush, sabotage, hit-and-run strategies against a larger, more powerful, usually traditional military force. The Americans responded to the conflict by forcing Filipinos to live in certain zones where the sanitation was bad, the people starved, and people died of disease. The way that the Americans treated the Filipinos was very similar to how the Spanish treated the Cubans. And, if you remember, those Spanish reconcentration camps in Cuba were highly criticized in the American press. So what was the aftermath of the Filipino insurrection? Well, thousands of people died on both sides. 20,000 Filipinos died fighting for their freedom, and it cost the Americans 4,000 lives and $400 million. At the end of the rebellion, a government was set up similar to Puerto Rico, where the President of the United States picked the governor of the Philippines. Furthermore, the war exposed discontent among African American soldiers who questioned why they were doing there. Because while they were being persecuted at home, many felt uneasy and troubled by the fact that they were fighting to suppress yet another people. Some African Americans did desert to the Filipino side and develop close relationships with the Filipino people. In the end, the Philippines remained a U.S. possession for quite some time. The Philippines eventually became free on July 4th, 1946. Now that you've watched this video, you should be able to discuss why Americans fought in the Philippines and what the aftermath of that fighting was. Thanks for watching.